Okay, let's take a look at policy as it applies to Zscaler digital experience. So policy in digital experience is really about the definition of applications and the probes that go along with them, and then which users, groups, or criteria are covered to ensure that those probes run. So let's take a look at this. Under configuration, I have a number of predefined applications, and I've already defined SharePoint Online. We can take a look at this. It's enabled. And then within these probes, I've got a Cloud Path probe and a Logon Page probe. So within the Cloud Path probe, let's take a look at this. We'll edit that probe. And the probe says, do the Cloud Path probe. It's going to run every 5 minutes, and it's going to apply for all users, all user groups, all locations, all departments, and all devices. Now I could select this specifically based on the groups during the authentication from SAML or SCIM from Zscaler Internet Access, flows through into digital experience for the groups here. Again, I could apply it based on specific users that have authenticated or come from SCIM, those location information, roaming users, specific locations, or coming from a private service edge. Again, that department information, or specific devices. I could also say, enable it for all users except users that match certain criteria. Then when we look at this probe, it's an ICMP, it's a Cloud Path probe, so a maximum number of packets, the interval between those packets and the timeout, and then this is the specific host. I'm on deval.sharepoint.com, so that's my tenant that we're going to probe for. We get to review all those criteria, and then we could click submit when we create it. I also have a web probe. This is a web probe type. Again, those criteria separate from the Cloud Path probe. And I could say, again, I'm going to do a GET request, and I want to send certain header information through as part of that request. And what I treat as a successful probe for this, or a successful response for this probe. So I could go ahead. I could add a new probe if I wanted to. Again, I've got web and Cloud Path. Here's my application, so let's do a web probe. We'll apply it for users only in the Internet ZPA enabled group. We'll click Next. Let's give it a name. Here's my SharePoint tenant, so we'll go back to Deval. And I could send a bunch of headers, X forwarded, if the web application likes that, and I could say Ryan. For example, I could add any number of additional headers. I say any number, there's obviously a limit. So these probes. And then what do we take as a successful probe? And then we have our HTTP status codes. 200 or a 304 not modified is classed as a successful transaction. Number of requests, the timeout, and whether we should follow the redirect. So this is all pretty static for an application probe that runs with SharePoint. Let's take a look at my custom application. So this is my Apache probe, and it's a private access application, so I should restrict it only to users that receive Zscaler private access. So again, my user group for ZPA enabled. We click next, and you can see here, because it's a custom application, I can add a lot more response code for what I treat as success. So whether it's unauthorized or authentication required, still a valid response code for the probe. If their response, if the URL in this probe receives a redirect, a 300 redirect, should I follow that redirect and then treat the probe based on the response there? I review that and I click submit, and I have that additional probe updated. I can take a look at my cloud path. I want this to run following the web probe. So once the web probe has been successful, I'm then going to run the cloud path probe. Again, I only want to do this for those users with ZPA enabled, so I can click save on that. And what protocol should I use for the cloud path? So I can use an ICMP, a TCP where we decrement the TTL, a UDP probe where we're waiting to see an ICMP response, or I can do something that's a bit more adaptive, and it will try that port 80, and then it'll follow that with UDP packets. We click next, we click submit, and then these probes are updated once I activate. So now I've restricted those probes to certain users and certain the user groups. These probes will run, or they'll continue to run on these clients because I'm part of that user information. And so with that, this is the construct. I can define my probes. I define which users, groups, locations, criteria for those probes to run. As those probes run, I can see those both from my dashboard and then drill down through the applications to see the health of those applications for those users for which those probes are running.